Well, to spy or not to spy, that question might not be up for debate for too much longer when it comes to cyber surveillance. That's because the government task force is coming up with legislation to force companies to find a way to allow agencies like the FBI to monitor online communications in real time or face crippling penalties. Despite promising privacy to their customers, soon companies like Facebook and Google could be forced to rewrite their programs to create backdoor monitoring tools to help the government intercept communications as they occur. But cyber companies aren't going down without a fight. To discuss this, I'm joined now by Himanshu Nigam. He's the founder of SSP Blue. Hi there, Himu. So it seems like the government can't figure out how to crack these codes, so it wants these technology companies to develop ways for the government to actually monitor and intercept these communications on its behalf. Even though the government is not going to help the companies find the codes or come up with the money to create these backdoors, is this the government trying to get the companies to do their dirty work?
Well, thanks for having me, Megan. I think the actual positive side of this is not so much that the government is trying to have the companies do the dirty work. The good part of that statement is quite the opposite. The fact that the government is actually saying to companies, you go figure it out, but you have to do it. There's a silver lining in that, because if you let the government come forward and say, hey, you know what, you're going to do it this way. I don't really understand how your code works. I don't really care. You're going to do it my way, or get in trouble, then you have the possibility of a network crashing, systems going down. All sorts of chaos can happen when the government does that without, and that's true with anybody. If you build technology to fit with another piece you don't understand, you can easily crash it. So the silver side of this is that companies can figure it out themselves, although it does raise all the things you were talking about, which is the privacy issues.
So how would a law like this affect the way that we interact with our technology? Would it mean that anything we save in our cloud, for instance, or that we see through Google Glasses, or even our keystrokes could be recorded and available for the government to pursue?
Well, I think if you're, there's two ways to look at this. One is if you're the typical user who's using these services, nothing's really going to change in your world. Historically, the government has the right to come and ask for information if they're investigating and they have lawful legal process, a search warrant, a subpoena, things like that. What they're doing now is they're saying we want to use that same legal system and get wiretap orders on people we are investigating in a criminal activity where the judge has authorized us to do so. So if you're not doing anything wrong, you will have no impact. You won't see any impact. If you are, on the other hand, trying to hide what you're doing and having real-time communications, and you're talking about blowing up a building or doing some terrorist activity, then obviously you may be subject to an investigation. If there is this technology built and instituted after a wiretap order comes in, then you could be monitored every keystroke, every conversation you're having, whatever the case may be. It is possible that's the direction this is headed.
But Himu, what guarantees are there that this backdoor wouldn't be abused? What kind of judicial oversight would the FBI need in order to access this customer information?
Great question. I think the reality is this. There's two really very good balancing or protective measures that are in place. One is that the government has to go through the judicial system. They have to ask a judge to authorize a wiretap order, which actually, and most people don't realize this, has a string of requirements on when you can actually get it versus a search warrant or a subpoena, which are easier to get. On the other side, the protective measures are actually coming from your own service. Facebook, Google, two perfect examples of companies that do an amazing amount of work to protect your privacy. So when a government comes, say, with a search warrant or a subpoena, they still put it through the rigmarole. There's systems in place that publicly, many people don't realize this. There's systems in place that they have lawyers looking at and saying, is this lawful? Is this make sense? Is it coming from the right agency? Do they have the authority to do this? And then are we going to disclose only what we're supposed to? Are we going to go beyond that? And are there systems in place to limit that? So in a very good way, the providers that these large tech companies are, their reputation is built on privacy, many of them. And because of that, they do a ton of stuff to try to protect the user privacy. So from that perspective, if I'm the user I feel, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
That might be the case, but the problem is that Google, for instance, and Facebook happened to start encrypting their emails when it was being sent from one to another. They did that back in 2010, all the way because of a hack. They did that to protect their customers. Now, what they are asking, what the government and this FBI legislation is possibly asking these companies to do, is to find ways for them to be able to open up that door. Would that make those companies more vulnerable once again to those type of cyber hacks outside of the government?
So what you're actually raising, Megan, is a very good security question, and that is, if you're going to wiretap an encrypted communication at some point, in order for the FBI to understand what is being said, it needs to get unencrypted or de-encrypted. And is it possible for a hacker to go into that de-encryption point and figure out what's being said, and therefore the whole idea of encryption goes out the window? And I think
how likely is this to pass?
So, well, how likely is it's going to be one of those that things get debated galore inside the Beltway. What will happen is the FBI has thrown out a pretty, what appears to be an extreme idea from many people's points of view. So what's going to happen is there'll be tons of debates for all interested stakeholders, those representing the consumer, people who are watching, the tech companies, the government's interests, the investigative interests. And at the end of all this, it may or may not pass, but what will happen, and I can guarantee this, is some kind of compromise will result where something gets done to help the FBI investigate in platforms where right now they have blindfolds over their eyes and terrorists are getting away with things that they're really worried about when it comes to protecting our own citizens, the people that we're talking to right now.
It is a very interesting legislation. Himanshu Nigam, founder of SSP Blue, thank you for weighing in.
Thanks a lot.